All right, let's get into this. We're always thinking about improving our lives by adding things, right? A new workout, a new diet, some new habit. But what if the biggest change comes from taking something away? Today, we're going to look at a really cool personal experiment. Someone giving up two super common things for 90 days. And the transformation that came next was, well, kind of mind-blown.
I just love this quote, because, come on, how relatable is that? The author isn't talking about some huge, life-wrecking addiction here. Nope, they're talking about the little things. That glass of wine after a long day. That sweet treat you have with your coffee. They're the little rewards we use to get through the day. Sound familiar? They feel totally normal, like the commas and periods that give our lives some structure.
So this whole story kicks off in what the author calls the 70% life. It's this baseline feeling, this ordinary world that I think a lot of us are going to recognize. Yeah, these things, they have a way of just creeping up on you, don't they? That feeling of being sluggish, not really sleeping well, and just having this constant low-level brain fog. The author felt like they were only running at about 70% of their full potential. And the really scary part, they had started to accept it. They thought, well, I guess this is just the new normal. But then came the call to adventure. Instead of just settling for that 70% life, the author decided, you know what? I'm going to try something pretty radical. An experiment. And this was the plan, a 90-day journey. And as you can see, it was not an easy overnight success. It started with a real struggle, what they called the ordeal. But after that, a critical shift happened, and it led to a total transformation. Let's start with the hard part.
Which brings us right to the ordeal. To put it bluntly, the first 2 weeks were, in the author's own words, absolute hell.
And we're not talking about just kind of wanting a cookie here. The cravings were described as a physical force, like this constant nagging ache in the brain. It was a real full-on withdrawal, complete with irritability and moodiness. The body was basically fighting back, and it was not happy. And this whole thing was a battle on two fronts. On one side, you've got the internal battle, the physical cravings, the mood swings, but the external battle was just as tough. Trying to navigate parties, dealing with peer pressure, it was a social minefield.
But for anyone who's ever tried to break a habit, you know that if you can just push through that initial pain, you get to the good part, the revelation. A huge shift started to happen.
And it wasn't slow and gradual, it was a really distinct change, right around that 2-week mark. This was the first sign that the worst was over and the rewards were finally starting to kick in. Wow, what a perfect way to describe it. That brain fog that had just been the default setting for years, it just lifted. Can you imagine that? That feeling of sudden, totally unexpected clarity. That was the first major payoff.
Then came the first big, shocking physical change. 15 pounds, gone. And not by adding crazy workouts or anything, just by subtracting 2 things from their diet. I mean, that's a pretty stunning result.
And the benefits just kept stacking up. Deep, restful sleep every single night. Stable energy that lasted all day long, completely getting rid of that horrible 3 p.m. slump. And on top of all that, clearer skin and less puffiness in the face. It was like a complete physical reset.
Now we get to what the author called the ultimate boon. Because look, the physical changes were amazing, but the biggest transformation, that was happening on a much deeper level.
This right here, this is what changed everything. Without those easy crutches, sugar and alcohol, the author had to learn a whole new way to deal with their emotions. So instead of just numbing stress or boredom, they actually had to sit with the feeling and then find a real solution, like going for a walk or picking up a book.
And the result of actually being present? It was staggering. Thoughts got way sharper. Creativity, which had kind of been asleep for a while, came roaring back. And anxiety levels, they just plummeted. They weren't riding that emotional roller coaster from blood sugar and alcohol anymore. They were just stable. So finally, we get to the return. The 90-day experiment was over, but life had fundamentally changed. The author was coming back to the world, but with a completely new perspective.
This captures the new mindset perfectly. Sugar and alcohol weren't a crutch anymore, something needed to just cope with daily life. They became a conscious choice. That transformed a mindless habit into a deliberate, once-in-a-while treat.
And really, this is the ultimate takeaway. The author went into this whole thing thinking they were sacrificing something, giving up a pleasure. But what they found out was they weren't subtracting at all. They were adding. They gained energy, clarity, presence. They got their own life back, but in brilliant high definition.
So it leaves us all with a really powerful question, doesn't it? It's not always about what you can add to your routine. Sometimes the biggest, most life-changing thing comes from what you're willing to take away. What old habit, what little punctuation mark could you subtract to add more to your life? Definitely something to think about.